In the sun-scorched deserts of Arizona 2006, a young YouTuber vanished without a trace. His last video, a shaky, anxious recording, hinted at a secret he claimed could change lives. Within days, his friends, family, and an anxious online audience began searching for answers, only to find themselves entangled in a mystery stranger than fiction. The man himself would re-emerge, not as a victim, but as the subject of a missing person case he never expected to be part of. How could someone disappear and be declared missing while still walking among the living? This is the story of a digital age ghost, lost and found in his own shadow. Joshua Hartman's disappearance began with a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his behavior, one that his closest friends noticed but struggled to articulate. In the weeks leading up to June 2006, he had become increasingly withdrawn, spending hours alone in his room, editing footage of the Arizona desert, the suburban streets of Phoenix, and the lonely expanses of the Superstition Mountains. His videos, once lighthearted and curious, now carried an eerie undertone, a sense that the world around him was watching, following, or perhaps even conspiring. In one particularly unsettling clip, Joshua filmed a cactus-laden ridge under the harsh midday sun, muttering to the camera about shadows moving where they shouldn't, and pausing mid-sentence as if someone or something was observing him. That night, he told a friend over instant message that he needed to disappear for a while. Cryptic words that would later seem chillingly prophetic. The morning of June 15, 2006 began like any other. Joshua's mother called his room repeatedly, noting that his bed was made, his computer still logged in, but he was nowhere to be found. His car remained in the driveway, and his belongings were untouched, as though he had evaporated mid-thought. The house itself bore no signs of struggle, no broken locks, no scattered objects, nothing that would suggest he had left in haste. The only clue was the last video he had uploaded the night before, a shaky, hastily edited piece in which he spoke directly to the camera, his eyes wide and unnervingly focused, warning viewers to watch the edges and suggesting that even familiar streets could hold threats unseen. Within hours, Joshua's absence drew attention online. He had been an early content creator on YouTube, a platform still in its infancy, yet his growing following meant that his disappearance was immediately noticed. Fans flooded comment sections with speculation, piecing together timelines, noting inconsistencies, and even tracking his known routes through the city. Friends organized search parties that combed local parks, hiking trails, and abandoned areas he had previously filmed. But these efforts yielded no trace. What puzzled investigators most was that every lead seemed to point to Joshua himself. Sightings, emails, and social media activity suggested he was present somewhere, yet he could not be located. The initial investigation by local law enforcement was both perplexing and painstaking. Detectives reviewed his computer, hoping that emails or online conversations might reveal intentions or plans, and they found fragments of messages sent to friends and acquaintances. In one, Joshua described seeing figures lurking at the edges of his camera lens while filming alone in the desert. In another, he wrote about feeling folded into a shadow, suggesting a growing detachment from reality. Yet there was no evidence that he had been coerced or threatened. No threats, no encounters, no forced entries. Everything indicated that his disappearance was voluntary, but his family insisted that Joshua had never shown a desire to vanish. As hours stretched into days, a strange pattern began to emerge. Local witnesses reported seeing someone resembling Joshua wandering the outskirts of town, near gas stations, convenience stores, and hiking trails, sometimes appearing anxious, sometimes completely calm. One hiker claimed he passed Joshua walking along a dusty path near the Superstition Mountains, muttering incoherently about living between worlds. Another report placed him at a small desert diner, sitting alone for hours as if waiting for someone who would never arrive. These accounts were inconsistent. No single sighting could be verified, and the descriptions varied wildly. Yet each seemed to suggest that Joshua was alive and moving within the community, even as he was officially classified as missing. Psychologists later theorized that Joshua may have entered a transient dissociative state, a psychological phenomenon in which a person detaches from their own identity and environment, sometimes wandering without conscious direction. In the context of early digital culture, His disappearance became even more mystifying. Joshua's online presence, his YouTube channel, continued to upload pre-scheduled content, creating the illusion that he had not vanished at all. To viewers, he seemed omnipresent yet unreachable, a ghost embedded within the very networks he had helped cultivate. By the end of the first week, the case had already attracted national attention. Newspapers and early internet forums buzzed with theories. Had Joshua been kidnapped? Was he staging an elaborate performance for his online audience? Or had he somehow become lost in a psychological labyrinth of his own creation? Local law enforcement remained cautious, unable to reconcile the tangible absence with the intangible sightings. The desert, a place of extremes in both light and shadow, seemed to conspire in the mystery, offering no definitive answers but endlessly suggesting the presence of something unseen, something just beyond the reach of reason. Joshua Hartman's disappearance in Arizona was not a simple case of a person vanishing. It was a collision of human psychology, early digital culture, and the unknowable expanses of the desert. Every lead, every witness account, and every fragment of his digital footprint painted a picture of someone both present and absent, seen yet unseen, a man caught in the strange intersection between reality and perception. The desert, with its harsh sun and deep shadows, became a silent witness to his vanishing, preserving the enigma of a young YouTuber who seemed to step into nothingness while the world searched desperately to find him. The early days of YouTube in 2006 were a wild, uncharted frontier. Unlike today's algorithm-driven feeds and polished influencer content, the platform was raw, experimental, and profoundly personal. Joshua Hartman was among a growing cadre of creators testing the limits of this new medium, documenting his life with a handheld camera and an obsessive attention to detail. His videos were informal, sometimes shaky, often punctuated by long silences, but they resonated with viewers who felt they were witnessing life itself rather than a performance. When Joshua disappeared, this intimate digital connection transformed a local missing person case into something larger, something almost mythic. Fans, many of them teenagers and young adults who followed his uploads religiously, became amateur detectives overnight. Comment sections erupted with speculation, piecing together timestamps, examining backgrounds for clues, and obsessing over fleeting expressions on Joshua's face. In one video, his gaze lingered on the desert horizon for too long. Viewers debated whether he was signaling distress or simply lost in thought. Another clip showed the faint shadow of a figure behind him. Some argued it was a friend, others insisted it was evidence of someone or something watching him. Each upload became a puzzle, each frame a potential lead. The line between audience and investigator blurred, and YouTube itself became an unintentional archive of the investigation. This intense scrutiny highlighted both the power and peril of early digital culture. Unlike newspapers or television, YouTube allowed a decentralized investigation. Thousands of eyes dissecting every second of footage, sharing observations across forums, message boards, and nascent social networks. Fans began compiling timelines, geolocating landmarks, and even visiting locations Joshua had filmed. Their dedication was genuine, yet it also amplified anxiety, turning a personal tragedy into a collective obsession. Witnesses' accounts were cross-referenced with his videos, creating a feedback loop where digital artifacts both informed and distorted reality. For law enforcement, the intersection of YouTube and the missing person case was unprecedented. Investigators had to navigate a world where every digital action could be simultaneously evidence and distraction. They traced uploads, emails, and posts, searching for patterns. Yet every lead seemed complicated by the platform's own nature. Pre-scheduled content, anonymous comments, and the sheer volume of observations made it difficult to separate signal from noise. Unlike physical searches where footprints and eyewitness reports could be cataloged and verified, the digital realm allowed misinformation to spread quickly, often blurring the line between genuine sightings and imaginative speculation. Joshua's disappearance became one of the first high-profile cases where a missing person was also a content creator. Early YouTube viewers who had never before seen the medium treated as evidence or a timeline found themselves grappling with unsettling questions. Could someone vanish physically while remaining digitally present? Could the persona curated online outlive or even replace the real individual? These questions were not just philosophical. They were deeply practical, as investigators struggled to track Joshua's movements when his online activity suggested he had not vanished at all. Each pre-recorded video became a haunting echo, a presence without physical form, complicating the search in ways traditional media could not. The communal nature of YouTube fandom further intensified the mystery. Unlike conventional cases where only family and friends were invested, Joshua's audience spanned continents, creating a network of amateur sleuths who debated his fate in real time. Forums dedicated to his disappearance sprang up, filled with intricate theories, reenactments of his last known locations, and obsessive breakdowns of his mannerisms. For some viewers, following Joshua's case was an addictive ritual, a way to feel close to someone who was simultaneously missing and omnipresent. The digital platform had amplified the urgency and horror of his absence, converting personal grief into a collective, almost participatory experience. What emerged from this frenzy was a new kind of mystery, one shaped as much by digital technology as by the desert itself. The footage, the comments, the schedules, and the timestamps became part of the investigation, creating a layered narrative where fact and conjecture intertwined. Joshua's disappearance was no longer simply a question of where he had gone. It became a study in how the digital gaze could transform absence into a spectacle, how an online audience could become both witness and participant, and how the early internet could magnify fear, fascination, and obsession in equal measure. The case set a precedent for the interplay between online identity and real-world investigation, showing how a platform designed for connection could inadvertently amplify mystery, confusion, and anxiety. In the shadow of Joshua's vanishing, YouTube was no longer just a stage for self-expression. It had become an evidence trail, a magnifying glass and a haunting archive, capturing both his presence and absence in a way that had never been seen before. The digital footprints Joshua Hartman left behind were deceptively ordinary. Uploaded videos, chat logs, forum posts, and private messages. Yet when viewed collectively, they formed a labyrinthine map of his presence, an atlas of someone who existed simultaneously online and physically absent. Investigators quickly realized that understanding Joshua's disappearance would require not just traditional police work, but a careful study of digital behavior, timestamps, and metadata. Every click, every scheduled upload, and every cryptic message became potential evidence. Unlike paper letters or phone calls, the digital trail offered both precision and ambiguity, marking a new frontier in missing person cases where presence could be simultaneously confirmed and denied. His YouTube channel was the first layer. Each video, from casual vlogs to explorations of desert trails, contained subtle indicators of time and location. Some fans noticed patterns. The shadows in Joshua's backyard suggested certain hours, while his background noises, the faint hum of traffic, the distant echo of footsteps or the shifting wind, hinted at more than just scenery. These minute details became the backbone of amateur investigations, as viewers compared uploads with maps, weather reports, and local events. Every upload was a breadcrumb in a puzzle whose pieces never fully aligned. Joshua's email and chat histories added complexity. He corresponded with friends in brief, often cryptic phrases, leaving investigators to decode intent and timing. Some messages indicated plans to disappear temporarily, while others reflected growing anxiety, paranoia, and a sense of being watched. In one chat, he described an encounter with an unknown figure on a hiking trail, someone who seemed to mirror his movements. These records were simultaneously comforting and troubling. They showed he was alive and thinking rationally, yet they also hinted at a psychological state unraveling in subtle increments. Beyond YouTube and personal messaging, Joshua's digital footprint extended into forums and early social networks, where his presence was occasionally documented by strangers. Anonymous accounts reported seeing him in town, sometimes hours or days after he had last been seen, reinforcing the dissonance between his physical absence and digital activity. Investigators struggled to reconcile these reports with the tangible evidence, or lack thereof, left in the real world. A convenience store clerk described seeing a man matching Joshua's description, but surveillance footage showed no one entering the store during the time in question. Each contradiction intensified the mystery, suggesting that digital presence could be manipulated, misperceived, or perhaps even misremembered by those who claimed to witness it. The technological aspects of his disappearance complicated traditional investigative methods. Metadata from videos revealed upload times inconsistent with his physical whereabouts, likely due to pre-scheduled releases or delayed processing, while IP addresses traced him to locations he could not have been at physically. Even his personal computer, left untouched at home, contained drafts of videos set to post weeks later, creating a chilling illusion that he remained active even while missing. Law enforcement had to rethink assumptions about alibis, timelines, and the reliability of witness statements in an age where presence could be digitally manufactured. For Joshua's family, the digital trail was both a lifeline and a source of torment. They could watch his videos, read his messages, and feel a fleeting connection. But each new discovery also deepened the sense of loss. The paradox was inescapable. Their son was everywhere and nowhere, a person simultaneously alive, absent, and documented in the medium he had helped pioneer. Even forensic psychologists noted that his case highlighted the unique tension between digital identity and physical reality. Online, Joshua existed in a continuous stream. Offline, he was ghosted from the world he left behind. This duality created a new type of suspense for both investigators and observers. Each click, each post, each online interaction could provide insight, or mislead completely. The interplay between real and virtual presence forced a reevaluation of what it meant to be found in the digital era. It revealed that while the physical world still governed life and death, the digital world had the power to distort, extend, or even fabricate existence in ways previously unimaginable. Joshua's footprints, both literal and digital, became inseparable, forming a tangled web where every attempt to understand him revealed another layer of uncertainty. In essence, Joshua's digital traces were more than evidence. They were a reflection of the modern human condition, a meditation on presence, absence, and perception. They demonstrated how the tools designed to connect people could also magnify mystery, confuse timelines, and complicate reality itself. In the desert of Arizona and the infinite expanse of the internet, Joshua's existence became simultaneously mapped and lost, documented yet elusive, a case that challenged the very definitions of being present, being missing, and being known. The first witness accounts of Joshua Hartman after his disappearance were both compelling and confounding, adding layers of uncertainty to an already perplexing case. Within days, reports began trickling in from hikers, store clerks, and casual passers-by, who insisted they had seen him wandering the outskirts of Phoenix and the Superstition Mountains. Each account painted a slightly different picture. One hiker described a young man standing at the edge of a sun-baked ridge, seemingly disoriented, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if scanning for someone, or something, that wasn't there. Another witness reported seeing a figure resembling Joshua in a convenience store hours later, quietly sipping coffee, yet the footage from the store's cameras revealed no one matching his description had entered. These conflicting sightings created a strange paradox. Joshua appeared simultaneously present and absent. Law enforcement struggled to reconcile the testimonies with tangible evidence. Each report seemed credible, yet no single account could be verified conclusively. Locals spoke of seeing him in fleeting glimpses, sometimes blurred, sometimes clearly defined, but always at impossible intervals and distances. One retired postal worker claimed he passed Joshua walking along a desert road near dusk, muttering about slipping through cracks in the world. The details were eerily specific, but investigators could find no corroboration. These reports suggested not only his physical presence, but also a psychological dislocation, as if he were moving in a reality slightly out of sync with the rest of the world. The pattern of sightings also highlighted a chilling aspect of the case: the temporal inconsistencies. Joshua was reported in multiple locations within the same day, sometimes separated by dozens of miles. Witnesses described him with varying moods: calm and contemplative in one report, anxious and disoriented in another. Investigators considered the possibility of mistaken identity, yet those who knew Joshua intimately insisted that the man in each account matched his appearance, mannerisms, and even subtle quirks of movement. These contradictions compounded the mystery, leaving authorities to question whether the man wandering the desert and town was truly Joshua, or an elaborate reflection of his own persona projected onto strangers. Beyond the physical sightings, there were subtle behavioral observations that drew attention. Witnesses noted his interactions or lack thereof with the environment. In one encounter, a hiker approached him near a narrow trail attempting conversation. Joshua responded minimally, offering fragmented sentences that hinted at paranoia, references to watchers and edges where the world folds. Another report described him pausing mid-step in a parking lot, staring at an unoccupied car for several minutes as if anticipating movement. These moments suggested a cognitive state altered by stress, fear, or perhaps an emerging dissociative experience. Observers could see his presence physically, but could not entirely access the reality he inhabited. Local law enforcement struggled to integrate these sightings into a coherent timeline. Standard investigative techniques, interviewing witnesses, tracking movement patterns, checking surveillance, often produced contradictory results. In some instances, Joshua seemed to appear in places under impossible circumstances, vanishing before authorities could respond. These accounts suggested a level of unpredictability that defied conventional understanding, hinting at the possibility that his disappearance was not just a physical vanishing, but a psychological or existential displacement, a man moving through a reality that only partially intersected with the one everyone else occupied. Even Joshua's family became aware of these sightings through community reports. Each claimed sighting was a double-edged sword, evidence of life yet simultaneously a reminder of his absence. His mother recalled a woman approaching her after seeing Joshua near a desert trail, insisting he had looked like a ghost walking in broad daylight. Friends reported similar encounters, each adding another layer of eerie uncertainty. They began to question what they truly knew about him, and whether the Joshua they thought they understood still existed in a form recognizable to the world. These witness accounts ultimately underscored a critical dimension of the case. Perception and reality were not aligning. Joshua's movements, whether conscious or not, became a study in contradictions, a pattern of presence defined as much by gaps and anomalies as by direct observation. Each sighting raised as many questions as it answered, leaving investigators, family, and observers to navigate a landscape where a man could be everywhere and nowhere at once, seen yet elusive, a figure simultaneously grounded in physical space and untethered from the ordinary flow of time and awareness. In this way, the witness reports transformed the case from a conventional missing person investigation into a psychological and social enigma, revealing the fragility of perception and the unsettling possibility that a person could exist in multiple realities at once, observed yet untouchable, a living mystery drifting through the desert and the city alike. As Joshua Hartman's disappearance unfolded, a deeper, more unsettling pattern began to emerge, one that blurred the lines between voluntary absence, psychological strain, and public perception. Experts later speculated that Joshua may have entered a dissociative state, a rare condition in which an individual disconnects from their own identity, memory, or surroundings. In such states, a person may act in ways that appear inexplicable to observers, wandering or interacting with the environment without conscious awareness of their actions. In Joshua's case, the state seemed to have been triggered, or at least exacerbated, by a convergence of stress, isolation, and the unique pressures of early digital fame. Friends recalled that in the weeks before his disappearance, Joshua exhibited signs of mounting anxiety. He became increasingly fixated on documenting every movement, every conversation, and every shadow in the desert landscapes he frequented. One close friend noted that he often muttered to himself, seemingly rehearsing lines or analyzing invisible interactions. These behaviors, while eccentric, were not alarming at first. However, as his online following grew, so did the scrutiny, and the weight of being constantly observed, by cameras, by fans, by strangers online, appeared to strain his mental state. The dissociative episodes may have caused Joshua to adopt a form of temporary invisibility in the physical world. He moved through towns, hiking trails, and desert roads in ways that defied predictable patterns. Witnesses reported seeing him at multiple locations within a short span, sometimes hours or miles apart, contributing to a sense of simultaneity and unreliability in his appearances. In these moments, Joshua seemed both present and absent, his mind partially untethered from the physical reality around him. Law enforcement struggled to reconcile these sightings with the lack of tangible evidence, footprints, surveillance footage, or eyewitness corroboration, leaving the mystery suspended in a liminal space between belief and doubt. Social and psychological factors intensified the situation. Joshua's online presence had made him a quasi-public figure in an era when digital fame was nascent. Each upload, each comment, and each video became a measure of expectation, a subtle obligation to maintain a persona, even as his mental state deteriorated. The dissociative behavior might have been a coping mechanism, a way to retreat from the pressure of constant visibility while maintaining a semblance of participation in the digital world. Yet this withdrawal was not complete. It was partial, fragmented, creating the eerie effect of a man missing in the real world while simultaneously alive and active online. Family and friends were caught in a paradoxical web of hope and confusion. Every account of a sighting, every trace of his digital activity, seemed to confirm that Joshua was alive, yet his absence in a physical sense remained undeniable. They were forced to navigate an unsettling new terrain where a person could be simultaneously visible and invisible, tangible and spectral. Psychologists consulted on the case noted that such dissociative states are rarely so prolonged or so public, making Joshua's case an anomaly that straddled the boundaries of psychiatry, criminology, and social observation. Moreover, the community's reaction complicated Joshua's own experience. Fans, strangers, and online followers treated each sighting as an event, a spectacle to be discussed and dissected. This constant observation may have reinforced his state of dissociation, making him more cautious, more elusive, and more withdrawn, while simultaneously encouraging him to continue appearing in public spaces in fragmented ways. The feedback loop created by this interplay of perception, expectation, and self-preservation amplified the mystery. Joshua's condition also raised profound questions about identity and selfhood. In stepping partially outside his own awareness, he forced observers to confront uncomfortable possibilities, that a person could be present without being fully themselves, that consciousness and physical existence are not always aligned, and that digital documentation can both preserve and distort the truth of one's experience. His wandering through the deserts, streets, and cafes of Arizona was not aimless. It was a reflection of a mind negotiating the friction between external reality and internal dislocation. In this context, being missing was not just a matter of absence, but a complex interplay of perception, behavior, and social interpretation. Joshua's dissociative episodes made him untethered from conventional timelines, difficult to locate and unpredictable in his movements. Witnesses could see him, yet they could not fully grasp him. Investigators could track digital footprints, yet the person behind them remained elusive. The psychological and social dimensions of his experience transformed the disappearance into something more than a case study. It became a living illustration of the fragile boundaries between self, society, and the digital world. As Joshua Hartman's disappearance lingered, the emotional toll on his family and community became increasingly visible. Each day without him deepened the sense of dread, turning what began as a worrying absence into a slow-burning trauma that infiltrated every aspect of daily life. His parents, once confident in their son's resilience, were left oscillating between hope and despair, scrutinizing every email, text, and online comment for clues that might suggest he was still alive. Even ordinary routines became exercises in anxiety. Phone calls left unanswered, doorbells ignored, and footsteps in the hallways all took on heightened significance, interpreted through the lens of fear and uncertainty. Friends reported a growing atmosphere of unease. What had once been casual neighborhood interactions became tense and deliberate. They worried not only for Joshua's safety, but also for the psychological consequences of being connected to someone whose presence was defined as simultaneously known and unknown. The internet, a platform that had once offered connection, now magnified every worry. Forums dedicated to Joshua's disappearance were filled with obsessive speculation, sometimes helpful, but often harrowing, with strangers dissecting his behavior, location, and even his mental state. For family and friends, the line between concern and intrusion blurred, creating additional layers of emotional strain. The community itself became entangled in the tension. Local residents reported seeing strangers roaming trails, asking pointed questions or photographing landmarks associated with Joshua. While these were often fans or amateur sleuths seeking answers, their presence added to a pervasive sense of unease. In cafes, convenience stores, and public spaces, people began exchanging whispered theories about his whereabouts, rumors fueled by fragmented witness accounts and online chatter. These murmurs created a collective anxiety, a shadow that hovered over towns and desert roads alike, where the sun-drenched landscape seemed at odds with the uncertainty and fear pervading those who walked through it. For the authorities, the emotional weight on the family and community added complexity to their investigation. Every official interaction became a careful negotiation of truth and reassurance. Detectives needed to gather information without exacerbating grief, to question friends and neighbors without undermining their emotional stability. Each lead was fraught with sensitivity. Even sightings that could potentially solve the case had to be weighed against the trauma of reporting them, the psychological burden of uncertainty, and the fear of false hope. The human cost of Joshua's disappearance became as important to address as the search itself. Psychologists and social workers later highlighted how the digital nature of Joshua's life intensified these emotional effects. His online presence continued to function after his disappearance, with scheduled uploads, archived videos, and fan commentary creating a surreal environment in which his absence was constantly contrasted with digital reminders of his presence. Family members described moments of seeing his familiar gestures and expressions online, only to be confronted by the stark reality that he was physically missing. This duality generated a persistent cognitive dissonance, a form of emotional whiplash that kept grief, hope, and confusion intertwined in a continuous loop. Even among casual acquaintances, the emotional impact was profound. Neighbors recalled unease walking past Joshua's home, noting the silence of an occupied space emptied of its inhabitant. Friends spoke of the chilling feeling of looking at familiar streets and realizing he might have been wandering those same roads unseen, or perhaps even glimpsed by strangers whose accounts would later filter into news reports or online forums. Every small interaction, every ordinary moment became imbued with a sense of foreboding, a reflection of the broader anxiety gripping those connected to him. In addition to grief and fear, there was a pervasive sense of helplessness. His family struggled with the knowledge that no matter how much they searched or hoped, Joshua's own behavior, compounded by the psychological and social dynamics of the disappearance, could place him beyond their reach. Local authorities faced similar challenges, aware that even a resolved investigation could not fully repair the emotional damage inflicted by weeks of uncertainty. Each passing day without concrete answers reinforced the invisible wound, the sense that someone could vanish from both the physical world and the protective confines of human understanding, leaving behind only echoes in memory, technology, and rumor. Joshua's disappearance, therefore, extended beyond the mystery of his movements. It permeated the emotional landscape of everyone who knew him or followed his story, transforming ordinary spaces and interactions into stages for fear, speculation, and grief. His absence was not just a physical void, but a psychological presence, a haunting reminder of how fragile the connections between people truly are when confronted with uncertainty, isolation, and the unknown. Joshua Hartman's case ultimately forced a reckoning with questions of identity, perception, and the blurred boundary between online persona and reality. From the moment he disappeared, the distinction between the Joshua who existed in the physical world and the Joshua who persisted digitally became increasingly difficult to define. His YouTube channel, pre-scheduled uploads, and online interactions created a persistent echo of his presence, a man who was simultaneously missing and actively visible to thousands of viewers. For those following the case, it became clear that the person they thought they knew was mediated through screens, comments, and digital records, a reality filtered through pixels and perspective, rather than flesh and presence. Observers and analysts began to consider how much of Joshua's identity had been performative, even before his disappearance. His videos often featured careful framing, intentional edits, and subtle cues designed to convey curiosity, fear, or introspection. These elements, while innocuous to the casual viewer, took on profound significance after he vanished. Fans debated whether the anxious gestures or fleeting glances toward the edges of the frame were evidence of impending danger, self-imposed isolation, or a complex interplay of both. The digital self, once merely a supplement to the real person, now dominated public perception, shaping narratives in ways that physical evidence alone could not. This dual existence complicated relationships, both personal and communal. Family members grappled with the dissonance of seeing their son alive in video footage, confident in his behaviors and expressions, yet unable to locate him in reality. Friends wrestled with the paradox of knowing him intimately, yet encountering witnesses who described a Joshua that was somehow familiar but not entirely recognizable. These experiences illustrated a profound truth. Identity is not only personal but also relational, shaped by perception, memory, and collective observation. When those elements become fragmented, so too does the sense of self, leaving a person suspended between reality and representation. Joshua's online presence also illuminated broader social implications. In the early days of digital culture, viewers were unprepared for the ways in which content could outlast, distort, or complicate reality. His videos, comments, and posts effectively created a living archive of his existence, one that continued to inform and mislead simultaneously. People could reconstruct timelines, interpret moods, and theorize motives, yet these reconstructions were inherently incomplete, shaped by the medium itself. The man behind the camera became inseparable from the digital construct, raising questions about whether anyone was ever interacting with the real Joshua, or simply a carefully mediated version of him projected through technology. This blending of realities intensified the psychological impact on those following the case. Fans, accustomed to engagement and immediacy on YouTube, found themselves part of a narrative they could influence but never resolve. Every comment, theory, and shared observation contributed to a collective story that eclipsed the physical investigation, illustrating the ways in which perception can dominate truth. In a sense, Joshua became a reflection of a society negotiating the boundaries of digital presence, visible, scrutinized, and interpreted, yet untouchable and unknowable in the flesh. Even professional observers noted the philosophical implications. Psychologists emphasize that being found in a digital sense does not necessarily equate to being known in the human sense. The Joshua present in metadata, forum threads, and video frames was only partially aligned with the Joshua experiencing the world. This disconnect highlighted a tension increasingly relevant in the early digital era. As technology allows us to project identities into multiple spaces simultaneously, how do we distinguish the authentic self from mediated representations? Joshua's case also underscored the fragility of perception. Witness accounts, digital footprints, and pre-recorded content all intersected to create a reality that was coherent in fragments, but inconsistent in totality. For the public, every glimpse of him, physical or digital, was filtered through expectation, prior knowledge, and emotional investment, further complicating the ability to perceive him fully or accurately. Identity in this sense was not fixed. It was negotiable, contingent on observation and interpretation. Ultimately, Joshua Hartman's disappearance illuminated the modern paradox of selfhood. He existed in multiple layers at once, as a physical person wandering Arizona, as a curated online persona, and as a symbolic figure within collective consciousness. Each layer influenced the others, creating a narrative in which reality and representation were inseparable yet often contradictory. His story became a meditation on how identity is constructed, perceived, and preserved, showing that in the digital age, being present does not guarantee being known, and being missing does not preclude profound influence. As the desert sun fades behind jagged ridges and the shadows stretch long across the streets Joshua once walked, we are left with a question that refuses to settle. How well do we truly know the people around us? Or even ourselves? Was Joshua Hartman a victim of circumstance? A man swallowed by the invisible cracks between reality and perception? Or something else entirely? A ghost walking among us, both present and absent? If this story unsettled you, lingered in your thoughts, or made you question the thin line between presence and disappearance, don't let it fade into silence. Subscribe now so you won't miss the next descent into history's shadows, where we uncover the vanished, the forgotten, and the haunted tales that refuse to leave us, and we want to hear from you. What would you do if someone vanished into the world around you, yet left traces that kept them alive online? Could you trust what you see? Or would reality itself begin to unravel? Comment below with your thoughts, theories, or experiences. Your voice becomes part of the story. part of this exploration into the darkness lurking behind ordinary lives. Every observation matters because in these tales, the smallest detail can be the key to unlocking the truth. Subscribe, comment, step into the shadowed corners of history with us.